Hello, welcome to the SCRP tutorial series. And in this recording, we're going to talk about how to access Stata on SCRP. So first, what is Stata? Now, Stata is a statistical software widely used in economics and finance, among other fields. And it has a graphical user interface version, as well as a console interface. Stata is known for having a rich assortment of estimation procedures. Anything you need in economics, particularly at the undergraduate level, Stata probably has it. It has a consistent and easy to use syntax, right? So because it's a single software written by a commercial company, so they do spend a lot of effort trying to keep everything consistent. This is in contrast to, let's say, if you're using another software where different people contribute different parts, sometimes things might not be that consistent between packages written by different people. So Stata syntax is very consistent. Stata also has excellent documentation. Now, this is really important in my opinion, because if you're learning econometrics, then the last thing you want to do is to spend a lot of time searching online regarding how to use a particular estimation procedure. Now, Stata includes its documentation as PDF files, and these PDF files are essentially econometric textbooks. So they have formulas, they have examples, and they have all the files and codes that you can just run. So it's an excellent source of information. So this is something that is very nice if you're learning how to use a particular command. So you just go and check out the documentation on Stata. It's also extendable. It has many user-written packages online that you can install. So Stata is very good to use. There is a reason why it's so popular in economics. Well, so what are the downsides? Stata is not free, which is why we cannot ask everyone to just install them on their own computers, like say R or Python, because Stata is not free. You can purchase Stata if you want to, right? And they do have a website. If you want, you can purchase it, but it's not free. In fact, it's pretty expensive if you want to. Stata pricing scales with the number of CPU cores. If you want, like say, 8 CPU cores or 16 CPU cores, then it's going to be really expensive. There's another downside of Stata is that before version 16, it assumes user works with one data set at a time. The current version is 17, which has a new feature called data frame, which if you're coming from other software like Python, you would be very familiar with. But before version 17, they don't have anything like that. So pretty much you are limited to working with one data set at a time. If you want to work on something else, well, you can open another Stata, or you have to save and clear the data before you load another data set, which is not very convenient. Starting with version 17, which we do have on SCRP, you can actually have multiple data frames in memory. So it's very easy to switch between data sets now. Finally, Stata is mostly a statistical software in the sense that it lacked modern statistical learning, machine learning, and AI procedures, right? So you're not going to run a neural network on Stata. That's not what it's for. It does have some of the more foundational methods, like if you want to run lasso, it does have that, but some of the newer methods it does not have. Right? So that's a consideration that you have to take in mind when you're choosing what software to use. Let's talk about SCRP. SCRP is a high-performance computing mini cluster managed by the CUHK Department of Economics. We offer remote access to R, Stata, Python, and MATLAB, among other software. In particular, we offer browser-based access to R, Python, and Stata. Cluster offers very fast storage, so even if you have a very large data set, you can load it very fast. We have daily on-site and off-site user file backup, and obviously there's a lot of computing power that you can use. One thing that makes the SCRP stands out from other clusters is that it's designed to facilitate both research and teaching. Most HPC clusters, especially the ones in universities, are meant for research. So it's really geared towards research in many aspects. But in our case, we actually wanted to serve teaching role. So ease of access is a core consideration for us. And you will see that when as we show you how to use Stata. So first, how do you actually access the cluster? The first step is you have to have an account. If you're a student in the Department of Economics, you already have an account. You should have received an email at the beginning of the term that tells you what your username is. Now, for faculty members, if you do not have an account, you can just email me if you want one. Step 2, you need to create a password. When an account is created, there is no valid password. So I don't know what your password is. You have to set a password online yourself. Just follow the instruction in the email. Finally, you have to connect to the cluster. And there are 3 ways to do that. Whatever way you use, you have to be either on campus or you have to connect to the campus VPN. So that means that if you're using a computer that is physically attached to the network, that's okay. If you're on campus using Wi-Fi, that's okay. And if you're not on campus, then you have to use VPN. So the 3 methods of access is, first, web access. You can just use any browser, navigate to these URLs, that would open an interface that you can use. Anything with a browser should work. So yes, it does work on an iPhone. It's just that the problem with an iPhone is the screen is so small. It's not going to be a very pleasant experience, but it does work. Second, you could use SSH access. So on Windows, you can install, we would recommend using mobile account. We find it the most convenient and with everything in one package. And if you don't like it, then you can use a combination of, like, say, PuTTY, WinSCP, and VZXServe. So there are other alternatives, but we just find mobile extern being the most convenient. And the third method is remote desktop, right? So you can actually use a remote desktop just like you would if you're using Windows. That's the third method. So which method of access should you use? They each have their pros and cons, right? Nothing is the best, right, in every way. Start with the browser-based access. Browser-based access, the pros are, well, first, it works on all devices. As long as it has a modern browser, it works. There's no software installation required, and it's very fast. The downside is you cannot use Stata's graphical user interface. Now, the graphical user interface does have some nice features, right? Even though when I use Stata, I mostly type commands and to run things. The graphical user interface still offers very nice variable viewer. You can also edit your code, and you can have access to documentation. So there are nice features to have, and the browser-based version does not give you access to those things. So that's a downside. The second method is you can use SSH, right? SSH allows you to use the graphical user interface as well as the console version if you want to. It's also very fast. The downside is it requires the installation of an SSH software. So you do have to install a piece of software. And furthermore, some students find SSH kind of daunting to use. Even though in our case, we really just need to connect to SSH and launch the graphical user interface, still some students find it an extra step, a burden. So some students do not want to use this method. And then we have the third method, remote desktop. Now, remote desktop, once again, you can use Stata's GUI version. And as benefit is there's no software installation required on Windows, right? You can just use Windows built-in remote desktop client. So the downside is that it seems like there's no way you can upload a file using remote desktop. Copy and paste works, but cannot upload the file. So you must rely on the previous 2 methods if you want to upload a file. And second, it uses a lot of memory. It's not really much of a concern for you because you don't see that. It's just that for us, when we maintain the cluster, the graphical user interface of remote desktop uses a lot of memory. All right, so let's try it out. We are going to demonstrate each method in turn, so you can decide what you want to do. So let's start with the browser-based version. With a browser-based version, what you do is you navigate to one of the URLs I point you to. So let's use scrp-login.cuhk.edu.ha. Right. So, .econ. I missed econ. Right. It's part of the Department of Economics. It has there's a .econ. So this loads the website, and to access data, you're going to use Jupyter Hub. We're going to use Jupyter Hub, and you can log in with a username. I'm going to use test user free, but you obviously should be using your user. And right, typing the password, log in. Okay, so it would start up a Jupyter server for you, and okay. So what do you do then? Stata 17 provides a way for you to access data through Python. What we'll be doing is that we're actually going to we're going to start a Python notebook. With this Python notebook, we're going to connect to Stata. This is a Python environment. So we're really running Python, but we're going to use Python to connect to Stata. The first step is to import Stata setup. Now, okay, so in this interface, I can actually I can zoom in a bit so that you can see it more clearly. Right, import Stata setup. Import Stata setup. This is a free package offered by Stata that you can install on any Python installation that allows you to connect to Stata. Obviously, you still need Stata. That part costs money. The Stata setup is free, but without Stata, it's useless. So you do need a Stata installation. Now we have already installed Stata on the cluster, so it's there. Import Stata setup, and then Stata setup.config bracket the path to Stata, and on the cluster is opt Stata, and then comma. You can specify the version. I don't see any reason that you're not going to use the multi-processing version. So just type MP, right? That's the multi-processing version, and shift enter. What you will see is that you would see the usual Stata startup display. This is what you're going to see if you start Stata in console mode. So it says that it's licensed to the Department of Economics, blah, 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 blah. And on the cluster, we have multiple versions of Stata. This is the standard one that's going to launch if you're using it for the first time. It's a 2-core version. It only uses 2 CPU cores. On the cluster, we have 16 core versions, but it's only available to postgraduate students and faculty members. But for most students, it's probably not going to be a problem unless you really find it too slow. Otherwise, it should not be a problem. Now, this loads data, right? Basically, it launches data in the background. So what do you do then? So what you do next is you can just start typing Stata code. All you need to do is to type this magic command, %sign Stata at the beginning of every text box. And then whatever you type is going to be interpreted as Stata code. You can just start typing Stata code. Like, for example, let's say you want to import a data set, right? You can import a data set. Let's say upload our own files. And in this case, I have some files that I want to upload, right? Let me upload so you can drag and drop. You can drag and drop files just from your file explorer onto the interface here, which is probably the easiest way to upload files, regardless of which method of access you're trying to use. I can also drag other files, right? So it's pretty easy to use. So I've uploaded 2 files. One is an Excel file. One is an Excel file called company records, I believe, right? It's company records, and the other one is I upload an employees. Sorry, company record is an Excel, and employee survey is a Stata file. So I have these 2 files, and I'm going to try opening them. Right. So use employee survey. The DTA is optional, right? So this is optional. It works. Nothing's going to be shown because you just import the file. You don't have to type DTA. That works too. So let's check what it is. Right, you can use the Stata list command. It shows you everything. So the data is loaded. You can also load Excel files. So once again, we can type Stata. This one. So if you want to load an Excel file, it's import Excel, and the file name is this case. I think we have the file name being company record.xlsx. Now, all right. So now this is the part where remember I mentioned that Stata by default works with only one data set in memory at a time. So that's what happens. Stata is unwilling to load another file because you have one already in memory. What can you do? Before version 17, what you have to do is to clear the previous file, and then you can load a new data. Starting with Stata 17, you can use data frames. and that means you don't have to clear previous data. So if you're interested in doing that, you can look for tutorials to do that. But for our purpose, I'm just going to say, well, I'm going to clear the previous data, load the new data, and check out what's looked like, right? And just to be clear, you don't have to type one command in one box, right? You can type all your code in one box and run it at a go. I am just demonstrating what you can do, right? So you're listing your data here, right? So like just to make it clear, you can have multiple lines of code. You can load the data, and you can let's say do a regression, right? Regress. And now, one thing I want to note is that that's why you want to list the data, is that you see by default Stata actually doesn't read the first row of an Excel file as the variable name, because it doesn't know whether it's in fact a variable name. There's nothing in Excel that indicates that the first row is variable name. So what you have to do is add an option called first row, right? First row. And this indicates to Stata that the first row is in fact containing variable names. And if you do that, so I'm just going to type multiple things in one command now. Okay, list. Right, now it works, right? It works. Okay, the variable names are here, so it works. And just to continue what I did just now, right? And then as you see, you can have multiple commands. And now I'm just going to do a regression. Regress hourly wage on experience and tenure, and there you go, the standard Stata output of running a regression. If you need to, you can copy and paste. This is not the best way to present your results. There are better ways, but that's something for a Stata tutorial, not for today, right? But everything works. In fact, if you need to, you can actually import data from Python into Stata. Right. Personally, I probably won't do this to import an Excel file, because I think it's easier if you're trying to import Excel file, just directly do it in Stata. But if you need somehow the data is already in Python, then you can do it. So let's just say we're going to use NumPy. Okay, so we're just going to do something very simple. Let's say we have NumPy array. Let's just call it A, right? Very uncreative, but np.sArray, and we're just going to provide three numbers, 1, 2, 3, right? Okay, so this is just demonstration, right? So you have this NumPy array, Shift Enter, and so I forgot to mention this, right? When you try to execute code in Jupyter, you press Shift Enter, and let's say we have this array, right? Then you can use the magic commands Stata -d. This converts a NumPy array to a Stata format, so you can just provide the NumPy array A, and then force clears the existing data that allows you to load something new. So So I guess I should list. So you see, it does work. What happens is I created a NumPy array with 3 numbers, and if you use -d A, that would load this. This would load this array A into Stata as a variable, right? And if you have something, let's say you have if you have multiple arrays like 4, 5, 6, right? Okay, let's try again. Shift Enter, then right. So okay, so you see there's something you have to pay attention to, right? And when you provide a single dimensional array, it's interpreted as a single variable. But if you provide a multi-dimensional array, like in this case, right, it's a matrix, then the rows are interpreted as observations and the columns are interpreted as variables. So that's something you have to pay attention to. But once again, this is probably only needed if somehow you have data processing that you're doing in Python. Otherwise, I would probably just import everything in Stata. Right. So this is how you access data with the web interface, right? The nice thing is that upload, it's very convenient, just drag and drop. It works with pretty much any device. The downside is there's no GUI. It's basically, you have to type codes, but it does work. It does work. Everything works. Right, that's the first method of access. Now to the second method of access, right? So you need mobile Xterm, just download it online. They have a free Word version you can use. And when you have it installed, open it and choose. So at the top left corner, choose session, and then top left again, SSH, remote host. Once again, it's SCRP login, scrp-login.econ.chuhk.edu.hk. You can specify your username, or if you don't, it would ask you, right? So it would, the first time you connect, it will say remote host identification is unrecognized, right? So it only appears in the appears on the first time, right? And so so because this is, if it's the first time you're visiting the server, there's no way for your computer to check if it's the right server. So make sure you're typing in the right address, click OK, then you can log in with your username. So in my case, I'm going to use test user free. Once again, if you're doing this a lot, then you probably want to save the username in the dialog box just now. But I'm going to do it once, test user, password. And once again, use your password. You probably want to save your password, right? But for my demo account, I don't. This opens up a terminal. And this is the part where students start finding very challenging. But really what you have to do here is type one thing. It's xdata mp. That's it. xdata-mp. That would launch the GUI version of Stata. Right. So it's a graphical user interface. It looks kind of ugly, but it has the same feature as the Windows version, even though it looks ugly, but everything is there. We can do the same thing as before, right? So for example, check, okay, we are our home directory. We can use employee survey.dta, right? It works. There's a variable, list of variable here. Now, it works exactly the same way, but now you have things like a variable viewer, which is very nice, right? You can also use the variable editor to, you can use a variable editor to actually change the values if you want. This is the, where you can search for help. You type help regress, and it shows you the menu here, right? It tells you what options there are, blah, 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 blah. There's also the PDF documentation, right? So I've never actually tried launching it in SSH. It does work. All right, it does work. There you go. So it's a very, as I said, this is essentially a econometrics textbook, right? It's so you have it's the PDF has more detailed than the simple reference within the Stata program. It has, you see, it has things. It's a lot of examples you can follow, and it also has equations about how the procedure works if that's what you're looking for, right? So there you go. This is not available on the browser version. Okay, so everything works, and so let's try another thing. So clear the data, import Excel company record.xlsx first row, right, and regress hourly wage on experience and tenure, right? Okay, so once again, if you need to, you can copy and paste. It does work. Right. In the GUI version, there's a feature that is slightly better than copying just the text output. Now, if you just copy this text output, it looks really ugly. Copy. Let's say you go to Excel, you try to paste it in, it doesn't work at all. It looks very ugly. That's not something you should do. In the GUI version, there's something slightly better, just slightly though. Is that you could do a copy table, and that comes out a lot nicer, right? It comes out a lot nicer. But this is still not the best way you can do this, right? This is still not the best way you can do this. There are even better ways. there's in Stata 17, there is built-in way that you can export tables in LaTeX format if you need to. So that's even better. But this, at least copy table, highlight, copy table is much better than just simple copy, right? This you can format in Excel if you need to. All right, so that's the GUI version. I'm going to close it. All right, I'm going to close it, and it doesn't allow me probably because there's some data. Clear, close. All right, okay. This is mobile external, and the reason why we recommend this is that you can once again drag and drop files here if you need to, right? So so you just drag and drop files here if you need to. It does work. So you can upload files here. Okay, so that's the second method. Now down to the final method, which is remote desktop. So if you're using Windows, just use remote desktop connection. This is built into every single Windows. And computer, type in the URL here, scrp-login.econ.chk.edu.hk. There's some settings you have to change, right? This is not exactly Windows remote desktop, right? This is using the same protocol, but it's on Linux. So there are some settings that you might that doesn't work exactly the same way. And one thing that you have to do before you connect is to set the resolution, right? So what resolution you want to set? That depends on whether you're on desktop or laptop, right? Because this is all based on pixels. So there is no awareness of the pixel density on your device. If you're using desktop, then just use whatever pixel that your screen has. Is good. That usually works fine. But if you have a very high resolution screen, like a 4K screen, or you're using a laptop, and laptop screens these days are also very high resolution. So then you don't want to choose the native resolution of your screen because everything will appear very small. Like say I'm using a Surface Pro, and the resolution of the screen is actually very high. If I choose the native resolution, it's going to be everything is going to appear very small. So say if I select full screen, right? You can try, but it's not going to work. It's not going to work well. See, everything appears so small. So this is not what you want. Instead, what you want is that you want to select a resolution that is smaller. And let's say you can select something like 1280 times 1024, right? So that's kind of like a outdated 4:3 screen resolution would be. Use that instead, and then connect. Now this still, you might say this still looks kind of small, right? But now because it occupies a smaller part of the screen, you can zoom in, right? You can zoom in and use something like, let's say 150. Now that looks a lot better, right? And then you can, if you can probably do a bit more, 175. Now it looks actually usable on a laptop. So that's something you bear in mind, right? You choose a lower resolution and then zoom in. Next, type your username and password. And that starts a desktop, just like any computer. Okay. Now for us, we're gonna want to launch the GUI version of Stata. Then you just go to Application, Statistics, Stata 17. All right. So okay, it took a moment, but it did launch. Right, it did launch. Right, so it does work. You can see that graphical user interface is actually nicer on remote desktop than if you're using SSH, right? But it's really the same functionality. It's just have a slightly modern look, right? Everything works as you would expect. Like once again, check where you are. You can import Excel company records, company record.xlsx first row, right? It works, right? Regression. So regress, hourly wage on experience and tenure, that works. Copy and paste does work. Once again, you can copy table, go to Excel, right? Just paste. It does work, right? Copy and paste works. And the only thing that, as I said, that doesn't really work is you cannot drag and drop files. So unfortunately, there's absolutely no way to do that. And that's just shame, because if you can drag and drop files, then it might be the perfect solution. So, but it doesn't work. So you have to upload files using the previous two methods. But otherwise, it works. Another thing I want to mention is if you just close the remote desktop connection, right? If you just close like this, right? Just press the cross, and the program is actually still running, right? So if you connect again, remote desktop, right? So show options, display, go, choose a resolution you're comfortable with, connect, and then zoom, right? Choose a resolution that you're happy with, type the username, password. Now you see, right? The program is still running. So that's pretty nice, right? If you're using remote desktop and you maybe just need to go to lunch, right? And the files, the program will still be there. There is a timeout. I think it's something like 1 day, 24 hours, right? So if you haven't, if you're not doing anything for 24 hours, it will terminate your session and it will be gone. But if you, as long as you come back, like in a few hours, it should be fine. It should still be here. If you are really done, right? If you're really done, then you can close the program, don't save, and log out. All right. So that would close the program. Okay. So that's the third method. So once again, what method you use really depends on your need. If you like, so if you're someone who absolutely cannot install anything, and you are really uncomfortable with the command line, then remote desktop is probably the easiest, right? Just use the built-in remote desktop connection of Stata, of Windows, right? Log in. So absolutely no installation is required for this method. And then you can start Stata. So everything works as you expected. This is probably the easiest method. Now, launching Stata is a bit slower than usual. So this is something I have to check. It should be immediate usually, but I don't know why it's slower than usual. I'll check that. But generally, it should be immediate. There's something weird today. But it eventually should show. But so that's one method. That's okay. So it's showing up now. The remote desktop also allows you to use, right, once again, the PDF documentation if you need to. Right, it does work. It does work. So this is probably the easiest method. This is probably the easiest method, but you can't upload files. For uploading files and ease of access, then the browser version is probably the easiest, right? And you just log in, drag and drop files here, and it should work. And in the case where you actually really cannot use remote any other methods to access the browser, you can do everything you need in Stata in a Jupyter notebook, right? It does work, right? It does work. Finally, SSH gives you a lot of options, right? But you will have to install an SSH client, and you will have to type at least one command to launch Stata, right? But provided you're willing to do that, it works. It works. Okay, so that's it for today's tutorial. I hope that it helps you do your research.